You're listening to A Crimson Autumn, Tales of Spirits, Monsters, and Mayhem. Written by Randal Woten and read by myself, Aaron England. Marvin's Last Escape. The hallway lights hurt Marvin's eyes. Every goddamn time he walked out of his room at the La Quinta Inn of nursing homes. Those soul-crushing fluorescent lights shot daggers into his retinas. The trip down the hallway to his friend's room would be a lot quicker without the walker. So close to his escape, he didn't want to draw any undue attention. No, Marvin Farthing, age 93, wanted it to appear that he was just another cog in the government aid wheel. He shuffled down the corridor, looking at the floor tiles, hunched back, pretending that every step aches, and that without this metal atrocity in front of him, he would fall right on his ass. He worked on this ruse for the last year. At first, the nurses would fawn all over him. They tried to help him along and say things like, "Oh, poor Marvy, you've really taken a turn this year, huh?" Marvin would fake a smile and reply, "Well, dearie, when you're my age, things seem to go downhill quickly." They would usually nod sympathetically and reassure him that he has years ahead of him to go. He loved this game. At supper time, he'd drop his spoon on the floor after rubbing mashed potatoes on his lips. Every now and then he would piss in his bed. He wanted them to think he was going to the great beyond sooner rather than later. In the dead of night, long after the orderlies finished their round of checks, Marvin would climb from his bed, slip off his socks, and run in place for 1 hour. During this time, he would recite passages from his favorite novels. Sweaty, legs numb, he would climb back into bed knowing two things. 1, his body was still sturdy. 2, his mind was alert. After shuffling along for more than 5 minutes, Marv reaches his oldest friend, room 116, Jonathan Leeds. No children, wife deceased, bedridden, and best of all, mute. They moved him to this ward to die 3 years ago. Marvin moved in the same day. The nurses got tired of going in for his daily talks that were requested by the doctor in charge, so Marv volunteered. He liked the idea of being able to speak freely to someone with no consequences. He walked in the room, walker first, made a circle shuffle, and closed the door. Stretching his legs and standing straight up, he casually walks to the chair by Johnny's bed. He grabs the morning paper off of it and has a seat. "What's the news today, pal?" he says aloud. "Let's see here. Terrorist bomb London train. Singer Johnny Fountain injured in limo accident. President Ronald Reagan sworn in office for second time. World waits for word on baby Jackie's recovery. And identity of D.B. Cooper still a mystery on hijacking anniversary. I think we'll skip all this. I certainly don't want to read about Ronnie Reagan today," he says while folding the paper up and tossing it on the floor. "How about you listen to me talk about my final version of my escape plan," he says while eyeing John. Johnny's eyes blink, but his stare is as it's always been, straight up at the ceiling. Honestly, Marv wasn't sure if John even knew he was there, but like Sunday confession as a kid, he goes through the motions anyway. "So I know I've kept you up to speed on my nightly workout regiment. Things look good there. No heart ticks, no wavy high blood pressure lines in my field of vision when I run. The orderlies have no idea that I have my best suit rolled up and stored in a bag taped under my bed. I've got a tie, t-shirt, and shined up shoes in there too." All bases covered on the wardrobe front. I get the loon at the end of the hall. The one with old-timer's mind disease to go apeshit in the hallway around dinner time. As the nurses and orderlies attend to him and his mess, I'll make a run for it out the side exit door in the lunchroom. The alarm won't go off because it's broken, according to the chatty know-it-all Alice at the nurses' station. I'll have my bag of clothes and money taped to me, and when I get clear of this place, I'll find somewhere to change. He stood up and stretched as he spoke his last line. Gently, he grabbed his walker and positioned it towards the door. "Then it's on to destiny. I've been waiting a long time. One piece of unfinished business, and then I'll be content to come back here and wait for my ride to the great beyond." John blinks on and off, but Marv's pretty sure he has no idea what he just said. One more night, he thinks, and by this time tomorrow I'll be out and about in the real world for a bit. He nods at Johnny, opens the door, and shuffles back down the hall to his room. Morning breakfast consists of eggs over easy, dry toast, and that damn fake orange juice they pass off as real. Marvin scarfs it all down as quickly as possible, leaves the dining area, and heads to the back room. He tells the on-duty nurse that he's feeling under the weather and wants to take a nap. She nods and allows him to shut his door for some much-needed privacy. Marv lays out his items and looks at them a final time. He runs in place for a few minutes, testing his blood pressure, and then places everything back into his hiding spot. He takes a time out and really does lay down for a nap. Memories race through his mind. He lets himself drift to sleep, thinking about destiny. 4 hours later, he awakes to a knock on his door. He calls out and the door swings open. The night nurse standing in his doorway. He swings his legs over the bed, hair disheveled, and looks at her as she speaks. "Marv, you feeling okay?" she spoke as she checked her clipboard. "I'm right as rain, my dear. Just needed a nap. Thanks for checking." She nodded, finishing her check marks, and moved on down the hall. He looked at his wristwatch. 10 minutes after 4. Fuck, he thought. A late start to his great escape. Marv jumped from his bed, shut the door, and began taping his bag of tricks to his body. The tape is uncomfortable, but nothing he couldn't deal with for an hour or two. He put his regulation comfy clothes and slippers on. He brushes his teeth, combs his hair, splashes some... He brushes his teeth, combs his hair, splashes some... He brushes his teeth, combs his hair, splashes on some cologne, and an hour later, he heads down to the dining area again for supper. They slopped the mystery meat on the metal tray, slathered it in gravy, splashed some canned corn on top, tossed on a roll for good measure, and handed him his tiny cardboard box of 2% milk. Here he is in his twilight years, and he's being fed like he was a teenager in high school. Marv picks the table with his crazy old-timers. He sits right down next to the guy and watches him as he pushes his food back and forth across the plate. "This looks like shit," the man whispers as he hits the meat back and forth on his tray. Marv shovels his food down his gut as fast as he can. The watch reads 5:30 in the p.m. as he finishes the last drop of milk in his carton. He glances around the room. Most of the other residents of this hellhole were already back in their rooms settling in for some nightly primetime television. "They have your real food hiding in the kitchen," he whispers to his diversion. The man perks his head up and looks around. He sees some movement in the kitchen and arises with his tray. Marv knows it's time to move. He walks behind the man and throws his tray in the dirty dish area. Marv scrambles down the hall just as he sees his ruse throw the tray into the kitchen area. Bam, slam, ping, the tray knocks over a stack of dishes. Orderlies and nurses converge on him as he screams. "Where's my real goddamn meatloaf, you fuckers?" He writhes and yells as they subdue him. Marvin begins to run for the exit door that's clearly not lit or working properly. Although he practiced at night, his running technique is not what he had hoped. His spindly arms flipped like noodles at his sides. He nearly lost his balance twice on the slick floor as his slippers have no traction. The only thing that keeps him going is the thought of reaching destiny. That and the fact that objects in motion tend to stay in motion. He hits the exit door handle with force, but the tape holding his belongings softened the blow to his ribs. Just like that, he was out in the world again. He kept running straight down an alleyway. He made a left turn down a street, another alley, another street, and just like he planned, he was in the middle of a bus stop full of people. He stopped for a moment to catch his breath. So far, it didn't seem like anyone was looking for him, or chasing him. He looked at himself in the reflection of the bus ticket window. His institutionalized look, white comfy pants, plain white tee, bathrobe, and slippers were sure to get him noticed sooner rather than later. He looked around and found a public toilet with a large stall and waited his turn. A fat man in a business suit stepped out, and along with him a smell of garlic and sewage. "I'd give it a minute to breathe before heading in, Chief," he said with a laugh as he waddled by Marv. Marv couldn't take the time to wait and pushed forward through the smell of the fat man's rot gut. Once the door was latched, he unbound the items from himself and began to get dressed in his suit. After a few minutes, he kicked the pile of discarded clothes into the corner of the stall and exited. He looked at himself in the large, half-broken mirror of the bus station. The suit, dark, tailored just for him years ago, clung to his wire frame as if it were brand new. He took the comb from his pocket and slicked his hair back. He reached in his pocket and felt the money clip holding a large amount of money. He tapped his wristwatch, working perfectly. He shined the face with hot breath in his pocket square. He gently folds the square and places it back in his pocket. He looks himself over one final time. He sees the man he was, the man he still wants to be, staring back at him. And for the first time in a long time, he allows himself to smile. He walks out into the busy station free and clear. As he walked to the counter and bought his bus pass to head downtown, he let the thoughts of all bad things wash away. He knew that the cancer slowly eating away at his brain was still doing its job. He knew that his kids still didn't visit enough, and he knew that his days on the big rock were numbered. He knew all that, and he still smiles as he hands his bus pass to the driver. He smiles as he takes his seat on the bus. He smiles as that familiar hum of the engine kicks in and lurches everyone forward. He smiles as the sun sets and city lights kick on around him. Marv looks out the window and watches the people mill around like ants in a farm built just for him. He lets himself enjoy the ride, the sights, and the sounds of life. God damn, I'm gonna miss all this nonsense, he thinks as he watches it all pass by 5 miles an hour at a time. The final stop on the bus route is a seedy part of town. Marvin gets up from his seat. His legs are sore from his run, or from sitting too long, he couldn't be sure. He forces his way down the corridor to the stairwell. He nods to the driver and gets off. The smell of street vendor food and beer overwhelms his senses. Everything looks bigger and different from the last time he was here in this place. He knew he was in the right area, but he needs a landmark to get his bearings. He wanders further down the street until he sees a familiar hotel. He smiles once again. Marvin knew that building because he designed the damn thing. He looks at it in wonder. I created that big bastard. His eyes follow the corner of the building up to the sky. He breathes in and closes his eyes. He relives the unveiling of the tower in his mind. That was a good day. A good day indeed, Marvin said aloud. A few blocks south and he would be at his destination. He walked and walked and walked for what seemed like an eternity. Finally he comes around the corner and there is destiny. He makes his way to the building. It is a white brick formed, nondescript and secretive looking building. A neon sign hangs in the entrance, a well-dressed man at the door checking identification. Marvin waits his turn in line. Once at the door, the man looks at him and doesn't even bother to check his ID. Welcome to Destiny, sir, the finest gentleman's club in the entire city. He spoke as he opened the door for Marvin. Marvin walks into the entrance. The lights dim. It's hard for him to see. Then, a wave of black lights and pulsing music hits him as he walks into the main room. 3 stages appear before him. Beautiful women dance and mill around him. He makes his way to the 3rd stage and grabs the only seat available at the back of the bar. He watches as a slender, red-haired vixen dances across the bar. The cocktail waitress approaches him and asks if he would like a drink. He orders a beer, a whiskey straight up, and a glass of ice water. He hands the waitress a $20 bill and smiles at her. She nods and says she'll be right back. The drinks come out quickly, and as he sips his whiskey, he surveys the room. She needs to be perfect, he thinks. The whiskey already making his head swim, he looks and looks and looks. An hour goes by. The whiskey is gone, the beer is drained, the water is now being sipped. He feels that familiar, I've drank just enough to be tipsy feeling come over him. He stands and begins to walk around, ice water still in hand. The music pulsates around him. It's unrecognizable to him. He realizes he hasn't listened to popular radio in quite some time. He gets an ice chip lodged in his throat and has a bit of a cough. A hand hits him square in the back. He turns to confront the person. Anger swells in him as he sees her face. She's all of 20 years old. Dark hair, ruby lips, sparks fly, just like the old song says. Her dark eyes, almost invisible, seem to call out to him. I'm Katie. Would you like a private dance? She calls out over the music. All Marvin can do is nod an enthusiastic yes. She gently takes him by the hand and leads him down the hallway to a maze of rooms. They end up in the furthest corner. The walls all mirrors, the lights flicking on and off, lighting up the place and immediately darkening the area again. She pushes Marvin down on a velvet couch and sits on his lap. What's your name, Sugar Plum? She says as she unbuttons his suit jacket and rubs his chest. Marvin, it's my name, but my friends call me Marv. I like that, Marv, she says, loosening up his tie. A song kicks on as she stands up. She gently unhooks her bra, baring her breasts. She straddles Marvin and whispers in his ear. I'm going to take real good care of you. Just sit back and relax. She breathes hot, sticky air into his ear. This aroused him. He watches as she dances before him, slowly and seductively. Every once in a while, the lights would hit the mirrors at the correct angle, lighting up the room, and he makes eye contact with her. He watches, and she climbs on him once again, the music pulsing as they begin to move together. He begins to think about his life up to this point, his failures, his successes, joys, and disappointments, the ups and downs. In the end, all we have are each other. Human beings, making connections, how we can, when we can. Marvin doesn't know how long he has left to live. In this moment, he doesn't care. In the end, we all just want someone to dance in our laps and look at us like we're the only people in the world. Destiny, to some, is just a strip club. To Marvin, it's the place you go to capture that one last moment of life. as she dances, smiles, and long after he hands her the money for her time, Marvin is just happy to be alive. Well, that was another story from Randal McGuff Woten's book, A Crimson Autumn. The next story I'll be reading on our next dispatch will be called The End Is Nigh. And then you've got The Love of Judy Stein coming up after that. And that might be the last story in the book. That's the last story in the book, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for listening to A Crimson Autumn on ZTO TV Podcasts. If you like storytelling podcasts, we just launched another one by Ray McGuff, Storytime with Ray McGuff, where he'll be reading, loose. It's basically him telling you a story. It's either something he's written loosely put together, or a story from somebody else interpreted through his, campfire style of reading these things. So check that out. That's on the feed. All kinds of new stuff coming down the pipeline, so keep it tuned right into ZTO TV Podcasts. I'll see you next time. Thanks.